Kerry-Anne Walsh, Claire March and Fiona Scott. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us. Look, we had the Labor Party launch yesterday.
Yes.
Kerry-Anne, what are they trying to achieve with launches these days, and do they work?
Oh, well, the launch is pretty much when the taxpayer
stops funding
their travel, and the party has to pick it all up.
Yeah. So does that mean the Libs have another week?
Look, it's a feel-good thing, isn't it?
I mean, funded travel.
Pardon?
The Libs
get to have another week. That's right. But it's all about the party faithful, and it's very much about the big announcements are pretty much out of the way now. They were all timed for the pre-polling. They were all timed to get some momentum. I mean, it's not as if the Labor Party hasn't been pumping out policies relentlessly for the last 8
it's worked, because we'll talk about the polls. We haven't seen a lift for Labor despite all these big spending things. But
except for Shorten, you did in the Ipsos poll.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll come back to all that. But the launch also, of course, was about the symbolism of unity.
Oh, absolutely.
Did people buy, do you think, the Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard?
But a lot of TV's atmospherics, as you know. I don't know about that moment. I mean, certainly I was watching Michael Kroger on Sky, who was laughing his head off, saying that, it was basically roadkill sitting there on the front bench.
I mean, we weren't allowed.
Labor,
I was there. We weren't allowed anywhere near them, not surprisingly. But
no, sure.
I'm told by various Labor folks who were there that they were genuinely chatting throughout the thing.
Yeah, you could see that. You could see it, but it was the team that was sitting on stage. I thought that was a really potent bit of symbolism, and I think.
But if you don't like me so much, we've got all this team.
We've got all this team here, and actually, this is not a presidential election. This is about the policies, and it's about the team, and we've all been together and we're united. And the women that introduced it, they're all well known. They're trusted. They're likeable. Chloe Shorten was fantastic. I mean, I thought it was one of the best Labor launches for some time.
All right. Well, Claire, I'm sure you thought it was a pretty good day out for the Labor Party as well. What do you think they were trying to do?
Well, I think it was representing and demonstrating that real change that we've been hearing from Opposition Leader Bill Shorten as part of his messaging. I mean, you're often looking for a compare and contrast between the major parties at this stage, and when you see that lineup, like they're match fit for their campaign, but more importantly, they're match fit for government. They've got a plethora of policies out there to sell. They've got, as you've touched on, a united team. They've got, really strong women on that front bench and next to Bill Shorten. I think, talking about symbolism, David, which you've touched on, is I think there's some symbolism in the fact that they were in Queensland in an offensive position, whereas the Liberal Party's launch will be down here in Melbourne in a defensive position, protecting some of those seats.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Fiona, to see how the Liberals do their launch on Sunday, Mother's Day, in Melbourne. Normally launches are about, the party greats and the heroes of the party being there to endorse the candidate. Are we going to see former Prime Ministers there for the Liberal Party if we go through the list? Malcolm Turnbull, Tony Abbott, John Howard. What do you think?
Oh, well, I mean, look, let's face it, we don't have quite the plethora of former Prime Ministers to trot out like the Labor Party did. But, I mean, look, I remember the Labor...
right
3 in the last 4 years.
Look, and you know what? I think that's a pox on both houses, Kerry-Anne, that we've been through that many Prime Ministers between both parties. Sure. Now, it's fine that Labor can put on, a Band-Aid and say, oh, look, everybody's happy and smiley. But everybody knows that's not the truth.
That.
Now, well, I mean, look, as I said, it's been a scrappy, 10 years in politics, purely around these reasons. But I do disagree with you,
Claire. You can have Tony Abbott there. I hear Tony Abbott won't be there. I haven't confirmed this, but does that surprise you that he's being kept away, or he's otherwise too busy to be there?
Maybe he's looking for more street-side libraries in the electorate of Warringah as he door knocks on Sunday.
Can I just say, can I offer Fiona and myself...
Sorry, David.
If Fiona's going to be in Melbourne, we're both from Penrith, Fiona and I. We're tough cookies. If Peter Dutton's looking for chaperones, if he gets a bit hungry and wants to pop out for dinner, we hear he's a bit afraid of having dinner here in Melbourne. I'm going to volunteer Fiona and I to be his personal bodyguard.
You'd look after him. All right. Very good. Well, I'm not sure if he's planning on going, but We'll see. Look, let's touch on the polls, though, because they're all being very closely watched right now. And there were two polls today.
Sure.
Ipsos in the Fairfax papers had a 52-48 lead to Labor. News poll 51-49, which hasn't moved since last week.
Yes.
What do you think? What do you
well, it's clear that Labor is still in the lead. Yep. The Ipsos poll had Bill Shorten's personal ratings improving.
And I think the News poll had them going the other way.
Had them going the other way, which of course was written up as a, tremendously sharp blow to the opposition leader. These numbers have barely moved for weeks. It's either 53, 47, 42, 52, 48.
They've come in, though. I think
they have come in. But that's what is within the margin of error.
Yeah, sure.
And both polls recognise that. Ipsos recognises it.
It's pretty clear to me.
News poll does also, regardless of the flavour of the commentary.
OK, a Labor win on the numbers, though, is still most likely. I think a hung parliament is also, I have to say, quite possible.
And I think that's been the talk of the town for many a long month now. We're not going to really get a true indication until the last 24, 48 hours. And that final news poll on a Saturday morning is generally pretty reflective. But I think you've also got this extraordinary dynamic in individual seats.
Well, that's
and that is really defies the predictions through these sorts of polling methods.
Isn't it? It really, these are national snapshots. What is going to matter is what's going on in about 16 or 20 marginal seats.
Absolutely.
The country, including your old seat of Lindsay, where Bill Shorten was today.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And let's remember that on polling day itself depends on who you speak to and what research agency. Between 20 to 40% of the electorate will decide on the day as to which way they're voting. They may say something into one polling agency, but it'll be different elsewhere. I think the stark difference between Labor in this election and the last election is that Mediscare bit, and you've got to think at this time in the last election, Labor had just launched in Western Sydney. They launched in Penrith, which, of course, Bill Shorten is there today, and they'd also managed to roll out the Bob Hawke Mediscare thing, which cut through very deeply. The fact that Bill Shorten's out there announcing silly things in Western Sydney today is a joke. I mean, the Berejiklian government has pumped $5 billion into hospitals west of Parramatta, including Westmead. They've pumped $1 billion into Nepean Hospital, and Bill Shorten comes up with $18 million. I mean, at the end of the day, the coalition has put more than 230% increase in funding into Nepean hospitals. So, I mean, Bill Shorten's come up really tight. He made a pledge at the last election, $88 million for Nepean Hospital. This is $70 million less. And what is it is actually buying the $1 billion upgrade to Nepean Hospital is doing? I mean, it's a strange announcement that he's done today, and I think he thinks he can just run Mediscare again.
OK, well, I'm not sure exactly what the money he's promised will do for Nepean Hospital, but Claire, the spending generally from Bill Shorten over the last week, childcare, pensioners' dental care, the emergency department money, there's been some big-ticket items, and yet the polls haven't improved for Labor. What does that tell you?
Oh, well, look, I have to disagree. I have to say part of the reason why Labor can support that spending as a starting point is because it's done the hard work in the lead up to this election to deal with those tax loopholes and incentives. So they've held their nerve on some big policies.
Wouldn't you expect that when he gets to actually spend the money that the polls will improve?
Yeah, but look, they're looking good. They're heading in the right direction. If you putting aside the margin of error, they're looking at those that his preferred Prime Minister rating has increased beyond the margin of error. We've seen Scott Morrison's approval rating decrease again beyond the margin of error. We've seen Bill Shorten's approval rating increase beyond the margin of error. It's heading in the right direction. While we're on polling, I just, as a kind of a takeaway here, I just fundamentally think the coalition left their run too late. If they had, 3 more months or, some more weeks, who knows, would they have been able to turn things around? maybe, but they fundamentally left their run way too late. They got their policies out there too late, and even when they did, they weren't really bold enough. They didn't go far enough. It's a bit of a nothing announcements out of these guys. And the Australian Institute had another interesting poll released today, which just tracked the shadow ministers and ministers' awareness rating across the country. And Julie Bishop, just taking one example here, had a national awareness and recognition rate higher than Scott Morrison. So she retires with an on-par awareness and recognition rating to Bill Shorten. Now, if they really were serious, if they really were serious about winning this election, they would have started with the leadership challenge. But what we see from them consistently is they just want to do
what
just
do you mean start with the leadership challenge? Haven't we had enough of those, Claire?
No, I didn't mean now. I meant they would have looked at it as part of their leadership challenge. But fundamentally, every judgment call they make is, and it goes to female representation, it goes to their policies.
Just on this point, there's a view, Kerry-Ann, within the government that voters are very cynical, we know, of politics.
Yes.
But now are quite cynical about spending promises as well.
Yes.
They hear them and they just think, you know.
Well, there's a lot of big money.
That's why Morrison has perhaps gone with very little in terms of spending promises.
Well, it's a bit like Where's Wally? You know, you've been looking in the picture to try and find the policy or, you know, at least one decent policy, and I can't find any. I mean, I really... And also it's a bit like Where's Wally trying to find a minister who's out there. I mean, Josh Frydenberg is you know, the wingman, but...
he's doing a lot.
He's doing a lot.
Let's talk about that.
Where's the rest of them? Where's the rest of them?
Well, it's a fair question. I mean, Peter Dutton's been...
It is a one-man band.
Pinned down in Dixon, the Environment Minister we have...
Pinned down, you think?
Well...
By whom?
OK. But the Environment Minister we just have not seen in months and
months. No. And I think
but it's a concession.
There's very good reason for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a concession that they can't match themselves with Labor. It's a concession that they just don't have the policy depth or the talent depth there.
I think there's clearly a strategy too here that Scott Morrison wants to draw the focus for voters back to the choice between him and Bill Shorten as leader. It means he's doing
steady as
all the heavy lifting.
Goes, is what he's
But Josh
saying.
Frydenberg, just to touch on the Treasurer's debate today, you had a look at that as well.
Yes,
what did you think?
Yes. I think they're both very competent. I think that it was a good exchange. It was respectful. You know, there was a few tough moments there for both of them, but you couldn't fault it. The only thing that Josh Frydenberg realised that he may have sort of left a window open when he said there were no plans to reintroduce the mega big business taxes, and he came back and qualified and said, I will confirm that we're not. But, you know...
Do you think Chris Bowen had a bit of difficulty on the childcare workers, why they're using taxpayers' money to top...
Yes, and I think that is going to need further explanation. I think that's a bit of a muddy area for them. I think, you know, you raised last week here when it was on the same day that this had been announced or within 24 hours. Well, what about the disability sector? You know, and they are really valid points. So that does have to be clarified. That has to be, or else it just leaves this uncertainty in the minds of a lot of workers.
There's also, you know, the question, and Claire, Fiona, get your thoughts on this. What happens if Labor can't get through the Senate some of this stuff?
Dead right.
We had a bit of debate today, the Press Club debate about mandates. You know, everyone would love to think that they win an election, they've got a mandate to do all they like, and Labor was talking a bit about that today. Don't forget, though, that you know, Labor never respected at the last election, I suppose, mandates on company tax cuts, for example, and other things the government took to that election. So what happens if they can't get this stuff through? Franking credits, negative gearing, capital gains tax. Can they still afford all this spending, Claire?
Look, sorry.
Well, they've shown themselves to be effective negotiators when in government, so I wouldn't discount their ability to get these measures through. And look, the difference here, these policies have been out for so long, and if the polls are right, Labor is expecting to win with an emphatic enough win for them to earn a mandate that should be respected. Now, there are some characters on the crossbench...
I mean, you can say that, but... As I say, there are plenty on the Senate who would say they've got mandates as well. And that's where it gets difficult, Fiona, as you know. Sorry, because we're running out of time. But, I mean, just on that, will the government have issues as well? It doesn't have nearly as much on its plate in terms of what it wants to pass through the parliament, but tax cuts, particularly for higher income earners, it may struggle to get through.
Yeah, look, David, you raise a really valid point that whichever way this election cuts, the Senate will be split and it will be controlled by the crossbenchers, whichever makeup of those will be. People like Centre Alliance will have a big say. Look, the coalition honoured work choices and repealed every action of that when they lost government in 2007. The Labor Party actually negated in regard to the repeal of the carbon tax in 2013 when they were convincingly defeated there. I think you've raised a great point here, David, because I think gloves are off, particularly with the way Labor conducted themselves when the coalition won in 2013.